Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much for those who logged in early. I hope you had a chance to check out the two webinars that are on the screen at the moment. So we've got two really exciting webinars coming up. The first one on July the 2nd, which has been presented by Dominic Del Molino, who's an Oracle ace and a member of the Oak Table, and he's presenting a session on topics in database version control. And then on July the 31st, Carey Millsap, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of him. He's actually running a session called Performance is a Feature. Here is the specification. It's a session that he ran at Oracle Open World in 2012. I would thoroughly recommend that you do sign up for that session. Details of both these sessions and access to all past webinars can be found at redgate.com/Oracle webinars. So before we get started, just a few points. Everybody will be on mute for the duration of the session. If at any time you can't hear me, please do let us know using the chat panel or the questions panel. Of course, please first check your own audio settings just to make sure something hasn't gone wrong on your computer. There will be a Q&A session at the end, but please feel free to type your questions in the questions panel in advance. We won't be able to answer any of these questions until the end of the session. But I think it's always really useful that as the speakers go through particular points, and if you want a little bit more clarification or you want things come to you that you want answers to, please do type them in as we go along. This session is being recorded, and I will send you details as soon as the session is, or the video of the session is available to watch online. So today's webinar is continuous integration with Jenkins and Redgate tools. The main presenters are Michael Christofides and Neil Anderson. So Michael is the product manager for the Oracle tools at Redgate. Neil is a software engineer. He's the lead software engineer for the Oracle tools at Redgate. As always, I'm James Mercer. I'm the creator and editor of allthingsoracle.com. Please do follow me at allthingsoracle if you're on Twitter. So this webinar, like all of the sessions that I run through Redgate, through All Things Oracle, is brought to you by Redgate and by the deployment suite for Oracle. Those of you who have come to the sessions regularly and maybe have accessed some of the past webinars may know a little bit about Redgate. If you don't, we produce tools for database developers and DBAs for the Oracle database. We've got a number of tools that you can see up on the screen here. They all fit within the deployment suite for Oracle. This demonstration is actually going to go through a couple of those tools, in particular Schema Compare for Oracle and Source Control for Oracle. I've got the UI for Source Control for Oracle up on the screen. So you're going to find out a little bit more about those tools as we go through this session. If you want to find out more information, please go to redgate.com/Oracle. But one of the things that sets Redgate apart from other tools vendors and what makes us more than just a tool vendors is our dedication to supporting the community and supporting anybody involved with the technologies that we produce tooling for. So this session sits alongside a whole host of resources that we run and that we put together to help you get better at your jobs and to learn new skills and new understanding. So you can find out about all this kind of stuff at redgate.com/Oracle-education. You can access other webinars, past webinar recordings. It's actually quite a nice archive there. We've got over 30 different sessions presented by people like Carey Millsap, by Tom Kite, by Jonathan Lewis. So some really good sessions in there. So please do check that out. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm the creator and editor of allthingsoracle.com, and these types of experts are also writing articles on there. So please check that out. And we also give away a number of free ebooks. And actually, the screenshot at the moment is for All Things Oracle, and you can see there's a book there, which is our latest ebook offer, which is a Tortoise SVN and Subversion cookbook. If you're using SVN, I would definitely recommend downloading that free ebook. Okay, so we're going to move on to the main presentation now. Before I hand over to Michael and Neil, I'd like to run a poll, really, just to get a bit of a better understanding on the challenges that you're facing with deployment and actually how you feel about deploying changes. So I'm just going to launch a poll, and it'd be great if you could submit your answer whilst I hand things over to Michael and to Neil. Okay, so you should see a poll up on the screen now. The question that we're asking is, when deploying your database, how confident are you that it will go to plan? And we've got a scale here, so almost 100% confident, very confident, about 50-50, not very confident, or are you absolutely terrified that when you deploy, things are not going to go to plan? So if you could submit your answer whilst I hand over to Michael and Neil, and then they will discuss some of the responses that you put through.
Thank you, James. So hi everyone, this is Michael from Redgate.
Hi everybody, I'm Neil.
We're just going to leave the poll open for a little while longer, just to give everybody a chance to vote. It looks like most of you have already, but that's great. Okay, going to close it in a few seconds now, and I'll hopefully be able to show you the results. Right, here we go. So on the screen now, it looks like you're a relatively confident bunch in general. There's a few not very confident people, but yeah, as a whole, there's a lot of very confident people and a few 50-50s, which might be depending on how critical of those deployments are, 50-50 might not be something you're particularly happy with. But the reason we're asking this is really to do with the whole point behind continuous integration, as far as we have experienced and as far as we're concerned. This is about giving increased confidence that when you do come to deployment, you are going to be able to do so straightforwardly in a way that you expect and without, so basically going to plan, without errors, without problems. So that's the essence. Thanks a lot for filling that in. Hopefully by the end we'll be able to give some of you ways of, some ideas or some tools to go away with, and maybe at some point in the future have a system that makes you a little bit more confident in those deployments. Right, so before we get to the demo, I'll take you through what we're going to cover beforehand, then I'll pass you over to Neil. So I'm going to take you through some of the benefits of CI in general, so not just database-wise, a little bit about how we see the database as different and what we mean, therefore, by database continuous integration. We've got some thoughts on the journey that customers have taken. So we've taken people along this route using our tools and just by talking to people on a daily basis. So we've broken those down into some stages and we'll walk you through those. We'll let you know the demo prerequisites so that you know what tools you'll need and system settings before actually trying this yourself, and then we'll jump into the demo of actually doing this. Of course, at the end, as James mentioned, we will have a Q&A session. Please do post your questions as you come along. And I've just spotted there is a question already, so just in case that's an issue. Oh, good question. So how many people participated in the poll? Just going to ask James, but I think it looks like there's around maybe about 35 people. So what's that make it? I think that's about right. Yeah, it's about 75% of 40. I'm probably, so 30 is, I think it's dead on 30, isn't it? Makes sense. Great. So not a huge data set. So don't go away using that in statistics, obviously, but it's interesting nonetheless. So the benefits of continuous integration. So these are just a subset, and I'll show you a couple of links to some great resources on the subject if you're interested in this. But we're assuming that most people are familiar with, at least for the purpose of this demo, at least familiar with the benefits of continuous integration. But the biggest ones for myself and the ones we've experienced best using this at Redgate are testing these changes in isolation and quickly. So you get to test them one at a time, but also integrate very quickly. Do my changes work alongside Neil's? We very quickly find out when they don't. So we get feedback when those break. We get builds that go red instead of green, naturally. We get visibility, so we can see across all of our projects which ones have failed recently, which tests have failed, and when they're all green, that naturally builds confidence that the tools are, if we ever needed to deploy, we're able to. So for us, that's tools, but for other people, of course, that could be that's internal applications and all sorts of other reasons. Hence, reducing risk come deployment time. Regarding disadvantages, now these are stolen almost exclusively from the Wikipedia article below, but basically setup time is always cited as a disadvantage. Of course, maintenance as well. And then, of course, you need, in order for this to provide value, you do need a test suite that you're confident in. And that requires creating and maintaining from then on. But as I said before, if you're interested in this subject, there are a couple of links below that we'll make available. And one of them is from Martin Fowler from ThoughtWorks, who's generally considered a thought leader in this area. So I highly recommend reading up on him.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one of the things that occurred to me earlier on when we were talking about this was that also CI for databases, I think for me it's about removing the kind of peak of the pain when it comes to deploying, and instead of just waiting until deployment time and then having one big effort to try and get everything together to make it successful, and then which is probably what the kind of 41% of you that are not that confident about how it's going to go experience. It's about just spreading that effort over a lot, automating it first of all, and spreading that effort over time, so that when it comes to deployment time, you have more confidence that it's going to work.
Absolutely, totally agree, Neil. Great. So, how's the database different? Why, if you're using continuous integration already, so many people are. Why are they not doing so on the database? Why are people continually coming to us saying, yes, we have source control set up, yes, we have databases, but we don't necessarily have, we have continuous integration for application code, but not for the database. So our thought process and the reasons we get back are effectively that it's much easier in the application world. You can deploy the application by throwing the old one away effectively and redeploying the new one. Now with the database, with the underlying data, especially in Oracle and relational databases, the data needs to persist. So you do need a way, you need a script or a way of upgrading that database from the version it's currently at to the latest version without throwing it away. So effectively, this causes a big issue. This makes it not the same, not quite the same.
I wanted to add that, yeah, one of the funny things about databases as well is that, like, in fact, the production database the risk gets higher because it gets more valuable over time. If your business is going well, I assume that your database is getting more valuable. The risk to you of losing that data gets more every time that you come to deployment time. So that's why, whereas with application code, it's less so. I think that you face a new set of challenges, either as risky or less risky each time, whereas with the database it just gets worse and worse and worse because there's more stuff in there to lose.
That's an interesting point, actually. No, I hadn't thought of it that way. I guess applications have their different challenges when it comes to downtime. I know a lot of website owners out there are worried about once you've got millions of users or even thousands and people are using it all of the time, downtime becomes an issue. So deployments have their challenges there. So, but yeah, there's certainly different things to consider, and there are some inherently different things about the database. And that's a good point. So I wanted to move on to what do we mean by database continuous integration. And so far, we're thinking about them in kind of two different ways. You do need to test the upgrade script. So you do need to test the individual things work as well as large upgrades. Now, traditionally in manual processes, as far as we can tell, people tend to test the big upgrades, but only when it comes to release, and that could be a long, long process. But the little changes are kind of only tested by default because they get made in the same shared environment. And if things break, no one knows exactly who broke it or why it broke, but you do know straight away that it has broken. Now, as we're encouraging people to work more in isolation where possible with source control, that can move backwards. It can be longer before you actually integrate those changes. Hence, the value of continuous integration soars as you work more in that way. So these are the two levels we split them into. Simple incremental upgrades. So by this we mean every time you check something into source control, make a database change, that kicks off a build, that change gets applied to perhaps a continuous integration environment, and your test suite runs, and you get feedback very quickly on whether that individual incremental change broke anything or not. We also think there's a lot of value in testing large upgrade scripts. So how about every change we've made since the last deployment to production? How does that work as an upgrade to production? Does everything still work? Perhaps we've got a much larger test suite against that. It probably requires a full restore of a database at some point to make sure that we're definitely applying against the last version in that was deployed to production. So we think perhaps at the moment that's best run nightly. Maybe you go away each night and kick that off, and when you're back in the morning, you'll see whether, in general, does everything work together. And have you got an upgrade script that you could upgrade to right now, and it would be, so you'd be confident in the deployment if you had to do it today?
Yeah, I think that the advanced kind of large one that we're talking about here, quite closely, it's the one that most closely mirrors what people are probably doing manually. And then the incremental one is a bit different. Like we were talking about this earlier on, and I was saying that it has two advantages, the incremental upgrade, which is that you get to know as soon as possible that you've broken something. Plus, incremental upgrades are probably more similar to the stuff that you're doing between your own internal environments. So that you also can lose time waste time trying to upgrade different environments to match each other. So they might be smaller incremental ones, but who wants to spend a day or more figuring that one out as well?
Absolutely. So this does boil down to time saved and things like that. Just had a question regarding, you might not have been able to hear Neil as easily as myself. I have been told I'm quite loud, but Neil is also sitting slightly further away from the microphone, so I'll make sure to pass him that when we pass over. So apologies for that. So regarding the journey we are taking customers on at the moment with the tool suite, and also what we see generally out in the market, it would be interesting to see also where you perhaps saw yourselves on this journey at some point, but at the moment we'll just walk you through what we see it as. So stage one is where we see the vast majority of the market right now. Now, from your survey responses, I'm guessing you might be further along than this, but a lot of the people that come to us are still creating scripts by hand to go from development to QA to production. Naturally, a lot of them are also now using our schema comparison tool and our data comparison tool to help create those scripts, but they're still being reviewed and deployed manually, and that's almost stage 0 on the journey towards database continuous integration. Call it stage 1 here. Stage 2, this is what our tool Source Control for Oracle helps with, and it effectively gives you some control in the development environment. So it helps you track who changed what, when they changed it, why they changed it, and also, if you want and if you're able to, move to a distributed or sandboxed environment where each developer or team are able to make changes in isolation and integrate at a later stage. So if one team need to implement a feature while another team are working on bug fixes, they can do so on separate development environments and integrate those through source control later. So that's stage 2. Without source control, you can never, in our opinion, get CI set up in a sensible way. Now stage 3 is where we'll leave you today after the end of this webinar, hopefully. So this webinar is focused on getting you from stage 2 to stage 3 using the tools. And this is a source-controlled dev environment plus those simple incremental CI processes that we talked about earlier. We see stage 4 with the automating of those manual test procedures that you're probably doing already as a more advanced stage. So that's the automating of those. So you can still gain value from the incremental ones and carry on testing, doing a release testing in the same way, and you still gain value. At a later stage, though, you can then implement the more advanced CI tasks, but we won't be covering those in today's webinar. Right, just before we start the demo, I thought it'd be wise to let you know what we'll be using. Naturally, equivalents to these would work in the same way, so this is very much, in theory, it should work. With these tools, we know it does. We're using Subversion as our source control system. We're using Jenkins as our CI system. You'll need on your CI system a build agent running Windows because our schema compare tool is a Windows only tool. Naturally, then you'll also need schema compare, at least the command line version installed on that build agent in order for this to work. And we'll be using source control for Oracle as our mechanism for checking those changes into Subversion. Great. So I'm about ready to hand over to Neil to lead the demo. Here you go.
Okay, hi everybody. So as Michael was saying, I'm going to demonstrate to you now how you can use RedGate's tools to set up continuous integration of your Oracle database. Okay, so it looks like you should be able to see my screen, so if you can't, please let me know. So to begin with, one of the key, so in this situation I'm going to be using Jenkins. And one of the main things you need to do, or the main thing you need to do, is install schema compare for Oracle on your build agent. So if you haven't seen schema compare for Oracle, this is it. The purpose behind it is to allow you to compare databases and generate upgrade scripts to bring databases into alignment. So if you have seen it, you've probably used the UI, but there's also the less known command line, which does the same thing. And I'm just running it on the screen at the moment just to show you that you can run the command line. So it's perfect for kind of automated environments like CI in order to tell are there differences. You can then use it to generate upgrade scripts to run the scripts as well against different environments. So well, I'll just let that run and you can see what sort of output you get. Let me see what else. So while that's running, I'll also explain a little bit about how this becomes possible, or how schema compare for Oracle makes this possible. So you can see there that the command line has output just said there's one difference between these two data sources. So there I've compared the widget dev and widget staging schemas to see, and just ask schema compare for Oracle, tell me, is there something different? So that's how it works in the basic level. But one of the really cool things that schema compare for Oracle can do is that the data sources that it compares do not necessarily have to be live databases. One or both of them can be either a snapshot, which is our kind of RedGate format, or a script folder, which is just a collection of SQL scripts that represent the database. So because those are the sort of things that source control in our current in the current technology for like SVN and TFS are able to handle, though that's the format that we can use to enable continuous integration. So because Schema Compare for Oracle can compare script folders and SQL files to a live database, suddenly you're able to link stuff like continuous integration systems or continuous build systems like Jenkins, source control systems like SVN and Oracle together via source control for Oracle, or Schema Compare for Oracle, excuse me. So I'm going to show you now how that actually all works together. So here's Jenkins. I'm going to create a new job. For this one, I'm just going to choose a freestyle software project. I'm going to call it, well, I've already called it the database CI before. I'll call it this one again. So the first thing I've got to do is, if I set up, this is what I like to do anyway, is I use a custom workspace. And I do that because I like to know, it makes it easier for me to tell where everything is going. So here I'm just going to put it in my temp folder. Then I need to tell Jenkins where my Subversion repository is. Here it's on my local machine, just like my build agent on my build server is. It's just for convenience for this demonstration. So, oh, don't know why that happened. Excuse me, I don't know. I seem to have lost my work for a moment. I'll just set it up again. So that's why I've used this kind of file protocol rather than an SVN protocol, because it's on my local machine. So that's the sort of protocol I have to use to specify the location I'm looking at. So once that's set up, the next thing to do is I've set up a build trigger, excuse me. So here I'm telling Jenkins how often I would like it to check my Subversion repository for changes. So I believe the magic runes are 5 stars means every minute of every hour of every day. So not sure if I can get it more granular than that, but hopefully that will be good enough for this demonstration. And then I've got to add build steps. So this is where our kind of batch file type calls to Schema Compare command line happen. So I've got these pre-prepared, so I'm just going to copy and paste them in, and I'll explain what each one means after that. So here, this is the most basic one. So here what I've said via the command line is that I would like Schema Compare for Oracle to, after Jenkins has checked out our Subversion repository or Subversion folder, I would like Schema Compare for Oracle to look in that folder for the widget dev schema as the source. So that's the one where these database we're deploying. I'd like it to compare it to this target, which is an actual live database. It's on our Barnacle instance, and I'd like it to compare it to the widget staging schema there. And I've given it the deploy flag because I actually wanted to then go ahead and deploy the changes and bring those two data sources to be the same. This little piece here is because at the moment the command line returns who knows why, but historically the number 61 when there's a difference between the two databases. So for this actual step, I expect there to be a difference. So I'm kind of overriding that error level to say when it's 61, return 0, because for Jenkins, it expects each build step to return 0 if it's been successful. Otherwise, it will mark the build as a failed build. So that's why I'm doing that there. So I said if it's 61, return 0, otherwise return 1.
So no, I just wanted to add there, it's probably worth mentioning that for the source there, we already put the schema widget dev that it's referring to there under source control using one of our tools. So you can do that either using Schema Compare by comparing to a scripts folder or using our source control for Oracle tool. So that's just where we got that folder from.
Oh yeah, that's correct. There's no magic. I haven't just made that up. So like Michael says, I'm going to show you in a moment me checking in a change to that schema, and hopefully it'll kind of make a bit more sense as to what's going on. So when I save this project, it should start looking for changes. So I'm going to give it a change to find. So this is our source control for Oracle tool. I've already made a change here. It's just a demo, so I've added a column to this table. So after I type in a comment, new column, and I check it in, source control for Oracle is committing that to my repository here on my local machine, the same one that Jenkins is looking at the moment. So when Jenkins picks up a change, it hopefully should kick off a build. If it doesn't, I might just prompt one off just to get it happen soon. Oh, there we go. So Jenkins has noticed that that something has happened, and it's started to build. So I'm going to show you the console output so you can see what's happening. So here, this is the command line output that we saw earlier on the actual command line. It might take a little bit of time. I really do need to look into why it takes a bit longer there. So this one is
I was just wondering if it was worth showing you in the meantime this the source control project, just to show you the settings of that and how it was connected to Subversion.
Oh, sure. Okay. So if I go to my project list, this is the project that I'm actually interested in here, the one that I've set up just for this demo. So you can see here that I've connected the widget dev schema to my repository on my local machine and into the widget dev folder, which is the way we represent schemas in the folder. So then that's the way it works at the moment. Oh, it failed. I did make it. No, because
What's the target? Is it widget?
let me just check what's going on, because it should have worked. Oh, do you know what I think it is? Is I already have this other Jenkins build set up, and it's already kicked off and made the change before my second one kicked it. So I better delete this one because it's not helping me in this situation. Oh, that's a Jenkins error of some sort. You can see if Jenkins will perform well for me and delete this one now. There we go. Okay, so that makes sense. So actually, we performed too well in that it pre-deployed my column before I was ready. Let me try it again. I don't know what's going on now. I'll kick off a build and see. I'll see if that other build actually got there first again. It might just have preempted me again. See, it'll tell me. So technically, it did work. Just I was looking at the wrong project. Okay, so this one, it seems like this has worked now. So this is what the other project actually would have done while I wasn't watching, which is run the schema comparison command line. It found one difference, then deployed executed the script that it had generated and ran it against that thing, against the target, and we get a successful build. So that's the most basic setup, which is just every time you check in something, deploy that change to another environment. I'm going to show you how you can make it better and how you can make it a little bit more advanced, and the type of things that you can do. That we're also working on new ways all the time of making continuous integration better for everybody. So I'm going to edit my project now to do a few more advanced things. So I'd like to add another build step. The second build step I'm going to add actually just checks to make sure that the first build step was successful. So there's always a chance, given the complexity of everybody's environments, that schema compare may not have worked, or we may not have given it the correct set of options that we would like, and our deployment failed. So we would like to check that with a second comparison to make sure that the previous deployment was successful. So in order to do that, I can add another batch command. paste string, which is basically the same. It's very similar to the previous one, if not almost identical, except that instead of the deploy flag being added, it just runs a comparison. When the command line detects that two sources are the same, it just returns 0. So that should mean that the Jenkins project is successful if the previous step has also been successful. So again, I'll just add another one. Again, source control for Oracle has picked up the fact that I've made a change and asked me, do I want to check it in? So when I do this, should kick off another build. So the problem with the first one was most of the time it wouldn't fail, and even if we had successfully deployed, because it would just say, or had not successfully deployed a difference, because it would say initially it returned value 61, so there were differences. It deployed, it was successful. It doesn't assert that the previous step had been successful. Whereas this one now will go through the 2 steps and make sure that we know everything has been correct, and you can pick up on those failures quickly. So again, it's found a difference, which is the new column. It's deployed it, and then the second step is running here, which is basically the same part but without the deployment. So it's going to just check and make sure that we get 0 returned so that we know there's no differences. Cool. So that was successful. So the third piece of the pie that I'm going to add in is that another cool thing we can do is that the command line is able to output certain things that we might be interested in. One of those things being the deployment script that it just ran. So the SQL that it generated in order to do the upgrade. So I would like my Jenkins project to archive each of those. Every time it makes a build, I'd like to be able to see what was the SQL that was run. So again, it helps me in figuring out why something failed, why it was successful, what sort of changes are being made, all those sort of things. So it makes sense to have that available all the time. So what I'm going to do is there's a flag that I have to add to the schema prepare for Oracle command line, which is called script file. Make sure all these things work. So when I add the script file flag, that means the command line is going to not only do the deployment but output a SQL file that I can read. Oh, I see. I've got a double here. Copy paste errors. Thank you, Michael. So, and in order to make sure that those are stored every time we make a build, I'm going to add here a wildcard statement to make sure that it picks up that SQL file and archives it. No, I think that's still going to work because it might not be there right now, but yes, okay. So I guess we have to add another. So many columns to add. Come back to my. So I'm going to kick this one off. So we've seen it pick these up so many times already. Oh, that's a good point. Michael just pointed out to me I haven't checked this one in, so I'll do that now. There is a comment. So I may have had a failed build there. Yeah. So it found no differences. So again, it was gonna. That's probably good. Pointed out what mistake I made. So I'll try and kick off this one now. So now that that's completed, hopefully we can see. Yeah, so the upgrade script has been archived along with the database project, with the run of the task, or is it a job in Jenkins, I guess, and you can see that this is the script that was run. So these are the scripts that are available via Schema Compare if you were to do this manually, but it's been output by the command line and archived by Jenkins. So you can see that my demonstration, the purpose there was to show that because Schema Compare is capable of understanding these SQL scripts, and you can leverage that to create this sort of CI system and get the benefits in the long run of constantly integrating your changes, integrating them at different levels so quickly so you can get quick feedback, overnight so you can get feedback for perhaps what you're going to do in the future and whether that's working, and kind of build confidence that what you're doing is, when it comes to deployment time, it's just going to be another day in your job, not this is a nightmare because I have no idea what's going to happen. So hopefully you can see how this might help you guys. So I think we're going to go on to a Q&A now. I'm going to hand back to Michael.
Fantastic. Thank you, Neil. I almost feel that was too easy. When the first time I saw this, I was so excited by the actual possibilities, and I thought it would be ridiculously difficult to set up. And in reality, because of the nature of the command line tool, it is relatively simple. So personally, I'm extremely excited by what that makes possible. This, for me, is the first steps towards very simple database continuous integration. Naturally, as we said, there are more advanced things you can do. Already with our Schema Compare for Oracle tools, some of those are relatively easy, but you might have to introduce other things like, as we mentioned, perhaps restoring from a backup, so you'll need other command lines in order to do that. But this enables that simple stage, and for me, is incredibly exciting. We've got a few questions as well, so I was going to run through a few of those now. The first one is around. Oh, bear with me. Yeah. So the first one is how is the Redgit tools different from Quest Toad? Toad. I think I might suggest that as a new brand name for them. But no, it's a great question. So Toad, naturally, a very popular IDE, has schema comparison inbuilt, and our tools are our main focus. So Schema Compare for Oracle is it was our first tool for Oracle. It's what we've become famous for. SQL Compare was one of the first tools Redgit ever did, which is our SQL Server equivalent. Now, this is a very mature tool. It handles a lot of cases. It's the main difference, the main advantage customers are citing to us over Toad is speed. So you might have noticed that those builds were doing several comparisons, I think 3 by the end, 3 separate schema comparisons, and they were getting done in seconds effectively. Now this was a very small schema, so that does scale with the number of objects, but naturally the main benefit we were saying about CI is how quickly you get this feedback on whether your changes work. So the faster those tools are, the quicker the higher the benefit effectively. So that's one of the critical advantages. The other one is that right now Toad don't have a way of checking these files into source control in a way that can be compared to and from. So right now, as far as we're aware, unless they've done anything in the last few minutes that I'm not aware of, this is the only way that I know to check files into source control and then compare from those to a live database and deploy differences as though it was a database itself. So a lot of these other comparison tools will compare database to database, but from a set of script files is not currently possible. The final point I would say is to do with the command line. So for us, the command line version of Schema Compare is a first-class citizen. We try and make every feature that we do in the user interface available via the command line to give you as much power as possible. So a few of the things you didn't see today were the ability to create reports in HTML format. There's a few others as well. There's options that you can set to really give you fine-grained control over what you consider as a difference and what you don't consider as a difference. So there's a few there for you, but do get in touch. Our sales people definitely have some more as well if you're interested in the full list.
Yeah, I think for me as software developer on Schema Compare, one of the main things that we like to pitch ourselves as is that this is our bread and butter. So we do this all. We are focusing on the schema comparison, data comparison, and source control aspects all of the time. Toad does so much more stuff than our tools, which is great for them, but also we see as an advantage for us in that we focus on making our tool as simple as possible, as accurate as possible. If you, for example, email an issue to oracle@regate.com, it actually is coming directly to me and Michael and James and Ben here, who are making these, who are directly involved in producing this tool. So you're likely to get some good support, you're likely to get your issue solved, and that's kind of one of the big differences for me as well.
So there's a good question around licensing, and that not pricing wise, it was to do with how do you actually license it on the CI server. Now there's a couple of ways. If you're an existing deployment suite customer or schema compare customer, you can install the user interface and go to the help menu and license it as you would on any other machine. Or now, most recently, we've got the SQL automation pack that was released a couple of weeks back that includes the Oracle tools as part of the suite and allows you to use a serial number, not a tag.
Command line argument.
Yeah, command and argument to license it as long as you provide the serial code. So there's a couple of ways we can send around the details on how to do so if you're interested. I think we've got your contact details there. There's a question as to whether it's available for trial. All of these tools that you've seen today are available free trial, 28 days for the deployment suite, and Jenkins and Subversion are open source software, so those are available completely for free.
So we've got a question here about wouldn't it be more beneficial to create a single command that would combine all of the three features that we just demonstrated into one, and plus a more visually pleasing output, something akin to a Jenkins specific command. So I take your point. I mean, I think the benefit of splitting the steps up mean that you can get more granular about what a failure means in your project. So for example, the second step was asserting that the first step was correct. I don't think at the moment in the command line we can, in one fell swoop, check that it was different first, deploy, and then check that it's the same again in one command. Perhaps if that's something, we're always open to new features, requests, and it makes sense. We're particularly now that we're focusing on CI and the benefits to people. It means the command line, for us, it's a first-class citizen. We need to make it easy to use, and we need to make changes that make that in the context of a CI system make sense. So, perhaps in the future that's a good idea. Plus, I also you can build, or I assume, I know in TeamCity at least, you can build a plugin that would make this whole setup easier. So, a nice UI with only requiring certain fields so that we can set up the rest. That's again something we would look into in the future, I think.
Okay, we've also got a question that's come in about data content. So this is an interesting one for us. So we do have a data compare tool that is able, again, with a command line version that you're able to set up. Now the difference currently is that will compare database to database, but not from a static version that you have in source control, for example. So you could ideally, and this is something we'd love to do, it's something we've got experience of doing for other database platforms, but not just yet for Oracle, is the ability to add certain tables to source control, and basically those are the static data tables or reference data, configuration data, whatever you call it. It's the data that's critical for your application to work. So we completely agree that should be under version control. It's one of the things we'll be focusing on. It's one of the things we know we need to do before this is a complete solution. But at the moment, you're not able to do that from source control. That doesn't mean you can't set up automation to make sure that data is in sync between environments. So the command line call can still be used. But right now, it's not quite to the same level as schema compare. So I hope that answers the question. Effectively, there was a little bit more clarity given. So table A and schema A and database A, can it be compared to table B, schema B, and database B? Absolutely, just not yet from a static version in source control. Those have to be from live database to live database at the moment.
Yeah, just a point I wanted to make on that is kind of, I guess, why that's difficult and why we haven't done it yet. So one of the things that we do in schema compare, and one of the things we focus on, is that our comparison between the SQL files and the database is I guess what you call a semantic comparison. It's not a text comparison. We do actually understand what every piece of that text means, which piece is a column, which piece is a comment, and then we compare it to, in the same vein, to the database. So, an example of where like a text comparison would not be good enough is, say, default settings for particular parameters, such as the parallel clause on a table. If you leave out the parallel clause, it defaults to I think it's just, I don't know, it could default to 1. But if you include it, you can still explicitly say parallel 1. Those two files, one that leaves out the parallel clause and one that says parallel 1, are the same, but a text comparison would say they're different. So what we have to do data is build a system that understands what each insert statement actually means, so that we can compare it to the actual data. That's why it's kind of a big piece of work that we know we have to do, but we have not yet come around to do.
Thank you, Neil. There's actually quite a few questions coming in regarding different features that we could do, and a lot of them are ones we're considering right now. There's one about object types that was critical for us right now. So there are a few object types that we've found are generally rarer, but we do want to do. We just need to know the order of priority, and now we're doing some research to make sure we get those right. Currently, the most popular one that we don't yet support is materialized views. So do let us know and give us your contact details if that's critical for yourself as well. So materialized views, materialized view logs. There's a few others that are high on our backlog. But you can find out from the Schema Compare UI, once you've run a comparison, there's the filters list which objects we support, and equally on our website, on our documentation site, there's a page listing the object types that are supported in Schema Compare.
I'll take this one, I guess. So Dan has asked, how do we suggest that an overnight kind of large or combined build would work with our tools? And can we use Redgate to revert the database to production level, for instance, before the build? So the answer is yes, you can use Redgate to revert the database to production level. So you could take a snapshot or create a script folder, a copy of the production database, use that to so if you were doing an overnight build, I guess you would create a new Oracle instance, or create a new Oracle schema, or a set of schemas, whatever you need. Deploy from the script folder using the schema comparison command line to these blank schemas to make it kind of the known version. And then you would run through the system we just saw. So because schema compare, figures out what the target it looks like every time, it will actually create a deployment script to get from your production version to what's currently in source control. And there's other options as well. You don't have to use Redgate. Like you could, whatever you currently use for backup and restore, that could be a step that you do first. If you've got a VM with a copy of your production, that could be the target, and you just restore the whole VM every time. So that sort of way, I think that's a really good idea, because that means that that's the closest thing you're going to get to reality when it comes to the real day that you have to do this kind of deployment.
Yeah, the follow-on from that question was to do with getting a backout script, or we often hear them referred to as rollback. Now, naturally, we thought long and hard about rollback. What does a rollback even mean for a database, especially once data makes it into the database? So there are naturally some complexities, but the comparison in the opposite direction, so from target to source, and creating the script for that, for me, gets you a lot of the way towards a rollback script. So it's worth testing, it's worth making sure that works for the kind of changes you're making, but that gives you a starting point for that rollback script, and is certainly a lot faster than some of the ways we've experience, people end up having to create those rollback scripts by hand. So that's a great question. That's a great follow-up. And yeah, we're certainly thinking along the same lines. There's another question here about exceptions. So can you filter out certain tables or triggers from this? So let's say you don't want to deploy those as part of this, or maybe you don't even want to check these into Subversion. Now, this is possible at the moment. Now, the way we showed you using the command line with schema compare is just one of two ways. You can also create a project file with the schema compare user interface, which outputs an XML file. Now, in this project, you can save objects not to be compared or not to be deployed by unselecting the checkboxes. So you could set no tables to be deployed. You could set specific individual tables not to be deployed. But that's suboptimal in my opinion. So you can do that. That will work. But let's say you wanted to filter out 200 specific triggers and 17 tables, and any table from now on that starts with the letters AB underscores for whatever reason. So it could get mighty complicated. We are looking also at easier ways of making this possible. Filtering, for example. So if you've got any specific thoughts on this, we'd like to hear them, and put precise details on what you do need to filter out, and perhaps even a where clause that you'd write to filter those out, just to give us an idea of the easiest way of implementing this. That would be fantastic for us right now. So if you've got specific thoughts on that, yeah, we'd love to know them.
Yeah, I think that's what Michael says is true, that we are looking strongly at filtering, and kind of filtering at every level, just from object type to kind of regular expressions. And pretty much all throughout all of our products is an enhancement that we're really interested in making, and we're trying to get some feedback as to what pieces of that are most useful for our customers. The other things that you can do via the command line that I didn't get to show, where you can use all of the kind of, we have a lot of options within certain object types, what you would like to say we ignore. So ignoring comments, ignoring the names of indexes, stuff like that, is all available via the command line. So you can't actually directly, without creating a project file, exclude types of objects or certain names, but you can exclude indexes that have different names, and there's various other ways of getting a bit more granular about what you would like us to consider different and what you would like us to consider the same.
Precisely. I'm just going to scroll back. I think there are a few questions that we might have missed earlier. I'm not sure we're going to get time to answer them. It depends. I'm going to look over at James nervously in a moment. But if we haven't answered any of the questions and we have missed them, then we'll get in touch via email, or we'll follow up in the email to everybody just to make sure. But I don't think we've got time. So basically, I wanted to thank everybody for coming along. It's been great. I'm getting shooed away now. But thanks all for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Neil. I hope everybody found that useful. A few of you, if you've come to regular sessions, you can probably sympathise with the risk of doing a live demonstration, but I hope that even some of that was useful for you to understand and get a little bit more information about the tools. And thank you so much for the feedback that's coming in. It does seem that this session has been really useful for everybody. As I mentioned at the start, I do run a regular webinar program. This one has been focused on Redgate tools, but a lot of the sessions are focused on kind of key topics and things that you can do. They're also presented by some of the best Oracle brains in the world. So, for example, we've got two coming up on July the 2nd and July the 31st, presented by two members of the Oak Table, Dominic Del Molino and Karen Millsap. To find out about these sessions and to register for them and to see all upcoming sessions and access the archive of past webinars, please go to redgate.com/oracle-webinars. So I'd just like to say thank you once again to Michael and Neil for presenting today's session, and thank you to everybody for turning up. I hope it was useful. So thank you, and I hope you have a nice evening or a nice day depending on where you are.